Welcome. I'm Russ Rapp, and this is my YouTube channel where I talk about non-duality. In this live talk, I'm going to discuss non-duality as it relates to relational awareness. And we'll get into what relational awareness is, what non-duality is here shortly. But I didn't give much of a notice. I didn't schedule this live talk out too far in the past, so we may have people joining here a little bit late. If you jump onto the chat, feel free to ask questions or make comments. If you're watching this video after the fact, feel free to add comments to the video. I know YouTube doesn't really give these live talks much credence compared to some other style of videos, regular videos, and that sort of thing. So there's not as many views that are had. But if you do come across this video and you're curious about non-duality, or you know a little bit about it and you want to learn more, or you're trying to find the ultimate secret of reality, you've come to the right place. This is this is my YouTube channel. Again, my name is Russ Rapp, and to start out today, I just wanted to get into a little bit about what what inspired me to focus on this topic of relational awareness. And I think what it came ultimately from was when I went back and watched a little bit of my previous live talk where I discussed something about um, non-duality and habits. Yeah, developing habits and how to break habits and stuff like that. So if you haven't seen that, check that out. But what I noticed in that video is my style that I seem to enjoy um, to take on when I make these videos is to free flow what is going on in my mind at the time. Words kind of come out, whether they make complete sense or not. But it's just this free stream of things that I've been thinking about that are currently coming into my awareness. And in a sense, it's a way that I just am able to communicate in an open way where it's not necessarily a planned or like a canned type of a pre-written script that I'm speaking of. That doesn't mean that I don't think about what I'm about to say or plan what I'm going to discuss in these live talks. But it's really a style that I enjoy because it just gives me the freedom to say whatever I feel like saying, and it's unscripted. And whether I say it perfectly how I would like to say it or not, it doesn't really matter. And so that's why I like doing these types of live talks where I can just say what's on my mind, and that's that. But what I noticed in watching those videos, uh, oftentimes I don't necessarily connect with the black dot of the camera of my laptop. And so what happens is when I don't make eye contact with the camera, then there's this sense that I'm not talking directly to the viewer of the video, the live talk, if you will, or if you're watching live right now. And so I think there's a big part in communication when it comes to making eye contact and talking to someone, because that's part of the reason why, especially in this niche topic of non-duality, is we're looking for something for ourselves. And by having a direct contact of communication um, to you as a viewer, as a listener, if you're not watching the, the video of it, if you're listening to this, I guess my eye contact doesn't matter. It's more like a podcast, I guess, at that point. And maybe you listen to it as you drift off to sleep, which is great. Um, put you to bed with the ramble style that I like to do. But as a viewer of the video, if you're watching this on your phone or on a TV or on your whatever screen you're watching this on, having that direct eye contact has an effect on the message in itself. It's kind of like One of the books I read in college was Marshall McLuhan, who wrote The Meaning is the Message. The media is the medium is the message. Yeah, I should have prepared for that one. But Marshall McLuhan, you'll find it. It's The Medium is the Message or something like that. And the whole point of the book is based on the style of communication that you are undertaking, that can have an effect on the communication itself. And so the medium that you choose can affect how is it's interpretive. And you can compare how back in the day before technology that we have today, when people get in town square, get on a stump or get on a stage or whatever and just start talking talking about current events or political things or the weather or whatever they felt like speaking. People would join there as a community and listen, and there would be debates and stuff like that. And so there's a lot more opportunity for long form discussion, a little bit more in-depth analysis of ideas, or more thought out rationale. Whereas compare that to modern day technology where we communicate via, like, let's say TikTok, where it's a very short video that is quickly consumed, and the brain interprets it and gets a jolt of dopamine, and there can be a message transfer, but it's not a long form. It's a different style, and there's not necessarily an incorrect or uh, one is worse than the other or better than the other, but it is definitely a change in communication style depending on the medium that you choose. And so when when I speak to you directly into the camera here, it has a different, I guess, effect on you as a viewer versus if I'm speaking and just saying what's ever on my mind and not looking directly into the camera. And it reminded me of my my grandma. I have a lot of similar traits as my grandma um, did, and she was one of those people that I think she lived on her own, and she did things in the community. She played organ at church and different things like that. But I think she got really excited when we would go to visit, and part of the result of that is everything that she'd kind of, because she lived on her own, because my grandpa died many years ago, and when my grandma was still alive, she lived on her own, kind of out in the country a little bit by a lake. And so I think she would store up all this stuff that she wanted to tell us, and it would just kind of come out. And oftentimes it would be about people that maybe we kind of knew but not really. And the the vibe that you'd get and a lot of times is that she wasn't necessarily talking to you, she's kind of talking at you. And maybe you've been around people in situations like that where the communication is kind of more of a one-sided thing. One person is dominating the conversation, and you feel like there's not really much of a give and take. It's a one-way versus a two-way form. And so kind of my style, what I like about these types of live talks is that I'm able to, it's more of a one-way communication, even though if you feel free to chat or make comments. But it's a form that I enjoy because it allows me to kind of have control of the conversation, have the reins as far as the direction of the conversation, the discourse that we have. And so it's similar in a way, but when I notice, when I watch myself in these live talks, it's kind of like um, when I don't look at the camera, I'm not talking to you, the listener, right here. I'm not looking directly at you. See, I'm talking to you. I'm talking to essentially no one, because there is no person. And so when I talk to no one, it's kind of me talking to myself, which is in a sense how we communicate as a non-dual entity. We're always talking to ourselves. And so we have, when I have these conversations, these live talks, and I don't talk to you directly, then it's not so much that I'm talking at you because you're choosing to listen, but it's more like I'm talking to myself, and you're kind of observing my thought patterns, what goes through my head, and that sort of thing. And you can make judgments or decisions or come up with other ideas of your own based on what I say, and that's fine. But I think what people are looking for that we kind of miss sometimes in these conversations of non-duality is this idea of relational awareness. And that's where when I have these talks and I'm kind of just on my own doing whatever I want, there's this, it gives you more of a sense of a show, of a one-way conversation, of a performance versus a direct contact with another human being. And obviously the medium is the message, and the fact that I'm on here, I've got the microphone, the camera's on me, you can watch me, but the only way that you can really interact is to chat in the chat box as we do this live. And at this point, it's not like a Zoom meeting where you have your own camera and you can interrupt me or you can take the conversation in a different direction. Ultimately, I can choose whether I read your comments or not, or answer your questions. And so really it's up to me in this form of communication. And this is kind of the buildup of the topic that we're discussing in this moment in this video of relational awareness. And so I guess I should first, if you're new to non-duality and you're like, what is this guy rambling on about? If you made it this far, congratulations. I'm proud of you. You're 11 and a half minutes in, and um, we just started covering the waterfront of the topic. So this relational awareness was something I knew there was some term that I was looking for, searching for, that I wanted to put, a description to or words to. And I knew there was a term or a phrase that would fit the bill for this. And, my original thought was like emotional and intelligence, but that's kind of a new, trendy term for, understanding other people and how they feel and relating and empathy and stuff like that. But, I kind of just focus more on the emotional side of it versus in relationships. There's so many other aspects, agreements, um, uh, moral codes, understandings, past history, everything that goes into a relationship with another human being that plays a factor. And so it's not just necessarily of understanding, being empathetic, or feeling other people's emotions and seeing where they're at that way, but it's more of a general way of relating. And so I did a quick search and came across a website. I don't know who this individual is or anything more about this person, but I liked what I read on here. So I'm just going to read a little bit from this website. It's alanmallory.com. I should probably put a link in the description, but it's AlanMallory.com. Alan Mallory, and he is some sort of therapist or something. I don't know. New heights in human performance and leadership. But his article on relational awareness, I'll read a few paragraphs starting now. While having a solid handle on our own self-awareness will help us navigate through life with more confidence and success, it's also important to gain a deeper understanding of how we relate to others and interact socially. It's not just about being aware of others or knowing what's expected of us socially. It's about recognizing the value of our relationships as well as being enlightened as to what makes our relationships work. Relational awareness is not the same as Elias H. Porter's relationship awareness theory, although there are similarities. His theory looks at how we establish and maintain relationships, quote, in order to have a positive sense of ourselves and our value as a person, unquote. However, for our purposes, relational awareness is, in a nutshell, the overarching ability to understand where we are in our relationships, which can help us find ways to improve them as needed. So that's just a little overview on relational awareness. And the reason why I think this is an important topic to discuss when it comes to non-duality is oftentimes the conversations, the questions that come up when it comes to in reference to non-duality is all focused on me what I can do, what I can achieve. How do I become more non-dual? How do I let things go? How do I, um, you know, see things, how they are? How do I understand what is or live in the moment? However you want to describe what people are searching for, seeking when it comes to non-duality. But it's always oftentimes a question of what do I do for myself? So the focus is on me, and me is the thing that really we're trying to point to and highlight as a way to understand what is not me, what is not the person, what is not the ego, the separate self. Because if you're not aware of the machinations of the separate self, the me, then you are most likely uh, out of habit. I'm trying to think of the right wording. um, Most likely going to be attached to the me itself, and I think looking at how we relate to others and others relate to us is maybe a different way to come at this topic, to look at non-duality versus just what I can do for myself. Because when that's the focus, then it's just more of the me trying to um, lose more of the self that it is manifesting. Which that didn't make any sense, but that's the point, I guess. So when you focus on your thought process, oftentimes it's looking at the monkey mind, all the stuff that's going on, all the stuff that we believe or attach to, and trying to somehow get rid of that or quiet the mind or let go of your current beliefs and stuff like that. But the focus is on how do I have this non-dual experiential awareness over the rest of my life? How do I make this something that's eternally true? How do I let go from moment to moment and not continue to have the same suffering and pain and attachments that I've had my whole life? So that's where the focus is on, and most of the seeking of how do I let that go? How do I look at things out in the world and not see the negative, not see problems or suffering? How do I see the beauty of life? And it's always about how I, as a separate self, am able to do something versus the most of the time the focus isn't on others and um, how we see others and how others see us. Because if there is a true non-dual master and you yourself are not experiencing that same truth that they seem to exude, then the truth that they exude is not true. It's illusion. It's a uh, I guess lie is a harsh word, but ultimately, if non-duality is something that you can become or achieve, then its truth itself is undermined. The truth of non-duality is a lie in that case because it becomes something that you can have, something that you can be, and something that you can be that something else doesn't have. And so it's this constant battle, this constant struggle to have something, to be something that someone else will not have, whether it's your past self and looking at how you can be in the present, looking at how you used to be versus how you are now, letting go of the evil past self that was the bad person, and living a truthful, honest, uh, non-dual, perfect life in the moment now. Or it's looking at others and saying, I don't want to be like that, I'm going to be better than that, or that sort of thing. And it's when you look at it in that sense, it makes it something that is a process that also separates you from others. And so when when you have that occur, what does that look like? How does that manifest in everyday life? It can look like someone who's sitting in their ivory tower, or someone that is thinking they're better than you. What are you? You better than me? Someone that's, you know, has to be right all the time and that you're wrong. some that is like even more egotistical, even though they try to pretend that they're not, because they, in the sense, have to hold up this image, this idol of perfection, to say that I am now this non-dual, uh, non-person that, you know, is free and doesn't attach to anything, and I am somehow above it all. And so there's this kind of air of superiority that can play a factor whether you attempt to or not. And so there's this idea of almost like a narcissistic tendency to hold on to this image of being a certain way versus coming to terms and seeing how things are, seeing what is and accepting that. It's kind of like this idea, we all develop in different ways culturally or personally, and depending on where you're at in your personal journey, your path, if you will, the path that leads to nowhere, essentially, wherever you are with that, oftentimes we struggle to see the bias that we bring to the table based on our position, based on where we're at in life. And even if you take, like, we take a dualistic approach to religion versus spirituality, and I think that can be best described in a way where religion is like rigid, structured, has rules. There's good and bad, evil, whatever, and and good. Whereas spirituality is more like the easygoing, free. Let's you know let go of our struggle and sing kumbaya by the fireside, and it's really like an individual connection and that sort of thing. And the description of God or the universe is oftentimes more of like a Eastern style of kind of an impersonal God that isn't there to judge you or have rules or be negative or get angry or have any sort of emotion. It's a God that is perfect in a sense. That face of God versus more of the rigid, angry God that is perceived or portrayed in religion. And so we make that separation, but I think what people miss is the connection of the rules of the guidance of God in a way that is beneficial, that is a form of love for you as a ignorant selfish separate self. And so we see that as a negative thing. We bring in our parental issues, whether we were ambivalent to our parents, or we were mad at our father, or felt like our mother didn't nurture us, or whatever our parental issues are. We oftentimes bring that to the table when it comes to higher meaning and looking for uh, answers to bigger questions in life. And so we oftentimes, especially since a lot of your um, religions that have grown over the last couple thousand years have come through or been created through a culture of more of a patriarchal style, then oftentimes a religion is seen as some sort of negative, angry father figure. And yet, if you look at it in a way where there are rules, there are structures, there are boundaries in life, and those things aren't necessarily a negative thing. If we see it for what it is and not just judge it as a negative thing, then it becomes more clear of what the message is. Because when we think of all the rules, we also have live by rules that we maybe don't deem as spiritual. We like physical rules of having to breathe, having to eat, having to drink water, um, having to sleep or take care of ourselves. And if we don't do that, we have consequences. There's negative consequences to our actions. If we don't eat properly, if we have issues with food, that can have a negative impact on our lives. You know, if we don't breathe for a period of time, we will die. So obviously, is not a good thing. And we don't see that as we don't judge that in a sense in the same way that we judge like moral codes or ethics. But if you look at it, it operates in a lot of the same ways, where if we don't do things that live in balance and harmony with life as it is, then we struggle, then we have pain, then we feel disconnected from what is, from life, from God. And that's where the rules themselves are written. The word is that there's ways that we can relate and connect with each other, that we can live a good, honest, true life where we can reap the benefit of that living, of walking the path of righteousness, if you want to call it that. And that's where, the rules themselves are created because of what is, because of the truth, because of of because of the truth of the nature of reality. And that's where it's not a rules because they want to hold you back. It's like the Garden of Eden in the tempting of the apple. It's kind of the same story of temptation, where it's not that God is trying to keep something from you. It's just the knowledge that you're trying to gain is illusory. And so therefore it seems like there's a rule to try to keep you from that because it wants to take something away. But it's God in that situation wants to give you everything. And the temptation, the serpent, wants to basically disconnect you from God and separate you as a separate self and take away everything that you have. Like God gave you heaven and earth, and the snake wants to take that away. And yet the trick, the magician's trick, the lie is that if you eat the apple of knowledge, then now you will have gained something, but it's actually a loss. And we have a chat from Martin Peniak. Nice to hear from you, Russ. Keep up the good work. Well, thank you, Martin. You're my first chat of this video, and it's great as a relational awareness to be aware of your comments, and so I appreciate that. And I'm actually going to read a couple more comments for some videos that I've made in the past that I saw here recently, because as a way to have good relational awareness, I can gaze deeply into the camera, speak slowly, maybe have my mouth slightly agape, like I'm just super relaxed, and just talk to you and make you feel like you're special, because you are special. God loves you. You are chosen to live a life of plenty, a life of love and happiness. And so when I talk directly into the camera, it makes you feel something different than if I'm just talking to myself and you just happen to be watching. So notice that your reaction to that, because we obviously see each other as opposite, or not opposites, but separate. We see ourselves as self and other. And so when we do that, one way that you can gain knowledge of the teaching of non-duality is to look at your reaction, to look at how you see me, and look at how that really says something about you. And so looking at your reactions to others can help you understand yourself, and vice versa. Pedro Manuel says, there's nothing to seek. Admitting there is a seeker is to admit that that which is seeking is separate from that which is seeks. So watching this live chat is useless. Yes. It's very useless when it comes to non-duality. But for some reason, I continue to make these live talks, and there you go. So yeah, that reminds me, I'm going to read you a couple other comments that are some good gems of people that commented some of my videos here. So we have one from I made a non-duality in 1 second video, so you can check that out to see how incredible that is. Nathaniel Peterson says, squeeze in the word apparently and put it on a loop for 30 minutes, and you have basically every non-duality video on YouTube. That's very similar. But that's why I stray away from using the repetition technique or the tactic of repeating the same idea over and over again as a way to combat the repetitive mind that tries to attach to something. So as you try to attach to that you're gaining something or learning something, there's this way to negate every single time that you attach it. Like there is no person, there's no one speaking. We didn't show up to this live talk. It's just everything is happening, but there is no thing. It's nothing has happened for no one, or whatever the phraseology that you want to use. I kind of just use standard, typical conversational discourse because that's just the style I enjoy, and it's a little bit more fun for me to do than to just say the same thing over and over again, which I do. Like my wife's brother said that you just kind of basically say the same thing over and over again in different ways, and that's kind of what you do. And I'm like, yep. So if you've seen the first couple minutes, you kind of get the point. Martin says, nice belief, Pedro. Pedro gave a thumbs up. Yeah, it's funny because as we try to define how things should be or what non-duality is, the definition, the process of making a definition themselves is creating a sense of duality where it's the idea that everything is relative. So the biggest truth in life is relativity. It's all relative. I remember hearing that in college. It's all relative. Yeah, there is relativity. There we are related. It's all relational awareness, if you will. That's the point of the video. And yet the statement itself is an absolute statement. So the absolute statement of relativism is absolute. So it's kind of the conundrum, the paradox of that. Oh, wait, I didn't see this one. I haven't read this one, so I'm just gonna. I like the first question though. So it's, my lies about non-duality. I think that triggers a lot of people. So, I think which is good because how do you learn about yourself is to see your reactions. What seems to upset you or make you mad or make you think. Oftentimes, that's a pointer to things that you can maybe sit with for a while and consider, and maybe that's something you can eventually let go of or learn something about yourself. But in that video, there's a comment 3 days ago from Tarkin Huggett. I don't know if I butchered that name, Tarkin Huggett. And Tarkin says, "Are you not a charlatan? You seem very confident and aggressive in bending words. Is the point you're making not stemming from self-righteous self-defeatism? Seething with agitated self-intent? It sounds like you've got some deep-seated issues, but your narcissism and ADHD is persistent and bugging." Oh, yeah. I shouldn't laugh so much, but I get in, I shouldn't let in the secret that I kind of enjoy when people make comments like that because then I'll maybe get more. And, you can only take so much. So I don't, want to see a bunch of negative stuff, but it just makes me kind of laugh. Um, it's like when, you know, people think, well, I watch TV, I see commercials, but commercials don't have any effect. Or I listen to the radio and I hear the commercials, but it doesn't have an effect on me. That I think is naive because it does have an effect. So if you watch violent material, if you watch pornography or anything like that, if you don't think it has an effect on you, then you should probably question that. And wait, hold on. So Martin says Neo Advaita often talks in absolutes, yet the importance of practice is vital, in my opinion. Yeah, I think in a sense there's always a practice with there's always something that you can play around with because the mind works in similar ways from moment to moment. So, it is what it is. Pedro says, I like not too better. Non-duality automatically gives birth to duality. One cannot exist without the other. Up can exit without cannot exit without down. Oh yeah, yeah. Up can't exit without down. Yeah, exactly. So that's why I like talking about non-duality versus oneness or unity or whatever like that, because uh, non-duality, not two, points out the dualism inherently built into reality as we see it, as we perceive it, as it appears. And so right there, it's kind of puts you on the defensive or opens you up to the concept of duality as a way that it's an illusion. Because if you focus on the term oneness, you can miss the point of not two-ness. Whereas not by starting with the not two-ness, it already says it from a framework of pointing out the duality itself. So it's kind of a way to see things, um, to point out the trick right away versus having you try to realize that after the fact that, oh, oneness, but then you're seeing it dualistically. It's pointing and saying, hey, you're seeing it dualistically, and it's pointing to this idea of oneness that you can't really ever grasp. Pedro says exists, so he's correcting what he's saying. Um, okay, so then, oh, in another comment of my lies about non-duality video, lies about non-duality, Paul Fisher says, who's to question another's experience? It's called personal experiential knowledge. No one can question or judge that. Stop with the explanation. There's nothing to unravel or decode. So if you listen to what Paul is saying there, it's interesting because I'm going to be honest. I haven't watched my lies about non-duality. I know that's my second most popular video on YouTube. The first is the best method to experience non-duality, I think, because that's what people are ultimately seeking with this, to have some long-term thing that their self can have, that they can obtain, to become some guru of non-duality where nothing happens to them in a negative way. But then the lies about non-duality, I think just the title itself, I think people are drawn to because they want to find some struggle or fight a battle. But the interesting thing about what Paul says, I'll read it again. Who's to question another's experience? It's called personal experiential knowledge. No one can question or judge that. Stop with the explanation. There's nothing to unravel or decode. And the tone that I get from it, and I could be wrong, but it's interesting because it's kind of I guess I'll in a nice way call it a paradox versus hypocritical, because Paul is on the one hand saying it's personal knowledge, you shouldn't be able to question or judge that, and yet he goes on to say to stop with the explanation. So that in itself is a judgment of me speaking how I'm speaking in the tone or in the way that I am, that he doesn't agree with. And so on the one hand saying don't question or judge, and yet in the same breath, essentially in the same comment, he's judging me as a speaker. So that's oftentimes what you see in your everyday life, is people say things but they don't really point the finger in the moment directly back at them, because of their reaction to it is should be telling them something about themselves, but they disregard that relational awareness. It's kind of like the idea of George Orwell and doublethink, doublespeak in 1984. If you haven't read 1984, I highly recommend reading that book. It really sheds a lot of light on everything that's happening in the world today, whether it's on a personal level or a political level, of saying things at the same time that have opposite meanings and that sort of thing. So I got one other thing I wanted to show you, but I forgot to grab it before I started this live talk. So I'm going to go grab it real quick. I'll be back in a minute. So if you have any other comments or questions, feel free to throw them out there. So Martin is busy retracting messages, so he apparently judged what he had written and decided that it wasn't what he wanted to say. So I cannot find the book. I don't know what I did with it, but I will find the website and I will put it in the description. I promise I'll do it at some point after this is over. Let me look it up real quick, just so I don't get it wrong. But it's something when it comes to, I've said in other videos that I really like the Enneagram as a personality typing system. There's other typing systems, but I like, that sort of thing. Um, but this is one that's focused on how others perceive you. And I should have planned ahead here. What is it called again? I'm blanking out. Oh, okay. I forgot I get emails from it. So now I remember. So it's like, my mind works in little boxes. It's kind of compartmentalizes where sometimes I have to be in the right mindset to pull that out. And now that I remember that I get the emails, now I remember what I was trying to find. So I will find the website and tell you about it. All right. So the website is How to Fascinate. And she also has a book, but it's discovered by Sally Hogshead. I think that's how you say her last name, but Sally Hogshead. So it's a profile. You can go online. I think you can pay, or there's probably a free version too. Essentially, I'm not going to get into exactly what it is, but since we're talking about relational awareness, oftentimes when you take Myers-Briggs or Enneagram tests, it tells you about yourself. But this is something where it kind of frames it from the other way around as far as how others see you, I think is the name of the book. But howtofascinate.com is the website. So if you haven't looked at that, it's just a plug. I don't get any sort of advantage of plugging her stuff, but I've just taken the test and learned about it. And I thought it was interesting, something that you can check out yourself. So I'll also put that in the description of the video, this talk here. Martin says, but that practice led them to their apparent realization, often an outcome of great frustration, but it wouldn't just happen just listening to YouTube videos. It takes disidentification from thought. Yeah, I think the way we frame, the way we understand non-duality um, can come from our level of development on a personal level or as a society, or through our practices. We can understand it in different ways. We can communicate it in different ways, but ultimately the truth of it doesn't need us to understand it. So it's readily available. It's apparent in every moment, the moment that doesn't exist. And so you don't need any formal training or any practice to understand non-duality, because it's not something that you will be able to necessarily cognitively understand. It's just the truth of what is right now, the here and now, the moment, the moment, whatever you want to call it, however you want to describe it. But I think, there is a way, from a personal development standpoint, to do certain practices and things that can help quiet the mind and find those moments to question your reality, to bring about some sort of peace, or to understand how things are operating in your everyday life and in the moment. So there's not necessarily anything bad about practice, but when practice becomes the thing in and of itself to try to achieve, to try to find what you're looking for, then ultimately you're never going to find it, because that practice in itself is keeping you away if your intent is to find non-duality, because it's not something you can find. It's always there and always available. Pedro says, I'd rather just get there, but not quite. This way I can still taste the sweet taste of sugar. Paraphrase from some Advaita Vedanta guru. Yeah, I I don't know a lot specifically about Advaita Vedanta, so I can't really speak to it. I speak to it from just an everyday person, um, and my experience of myself and my relationship to my self-identification, and kind of speak through that to you and point to my interpretation of non-duality, from whatever bias or perspective that I appear to have. And you will perceive me in whatever way that you will see me, whether or not it's ultimately true or not close to reality, because, you know, I don't have this draped image of some sort of like pattern design that makes it look like I have some sort of like halo out of my seventh chakra, and I don't sit a certain way. I drink mimosas, I babble, I don't come across as a perfect human being. And that's my style. Part of it is I'm aware of that. Part of it is just natural, but it is what it is. And so that's where, regardless of, anything with non-duality, the sugar still tastes sweet, regardless of whether it's an illusion or not. Martin says, I mean to live it as experience rather than just intellectually understand it. Yeah, I think when it comes to these talks, we're ultimately talking from the mind, or at least I am. I don't come to this and try to get into like a meditative state. So I'm not on, delta wavelengths, or, beta waves or anything like that. I'm most likely in the everyday conversation type of a mindset. And so to some people that can probably turn them off, to say, this is just some guy I see at the grocery store. Who is this guy to speak on non-duality? He's just some guy babbling about nonsense. He doesn't know what he's talking about. He's just a moron that just is probably a narcissistic idiot that just wants to have attention, or whatever thing you want. Like some of the beautiful comments that I get. That's where it's funny to me, because that's the style I like, because then it's non-duality is kind of like a mirror where you throw up your own judgments and your own criticisms, and it's a way to see who you are. And I think, just from the form, the medium is the message. Having these live talks, it is a dialogue. It is mental. We're not doing a yoga pose. We're not going for a run. We're not eating a delicious bowl of ice cream. We're just talking about stuff. And so it's kind of the babbling brook of the mind just speaking how it speaks, and it's not something. And what is being sought is that I will speak something and you will connect to it. So this idea of talking directly into that little black dot, which, some in some sense it feels unnatural as a human being to talk into a circle and pretend that it's like another human being. And so, in a sense, I'm delusional myself to think that I'm talking to you, and I'm just literally talking in a room, sitting on a floor in a corner by a dresser, talking to a laptop and a little dot that's a camera. So that's the reality of the situation. But it's like suspended disbelief where I'm pretending that I'm speaking to a human being, partly because I know there's reinforcement from the chat where people are hearing what I'm saying and responding to it. But ultimately, it's just me sitting in the corner battling about non-duality. And so the conversation itself is an intellectual one because that's how it's being presented. And to experience it, then it becomes a matter of having some sort of definition of what experience non-duality really means, because and then it goes back to you as an individual, as a me, as an I wanting to experience something, to have that verb versus a verbing versus something happening. It's you obtaining that thing, obtaining that action, obtaining that experience, if you will. And so that's becomes the carrot that is put in front of you to try to achieve, to try to find, to grasp, to eat, to gnaw on. So you try to experience something, and when you don't experience that, when you feel disconnected, when you have problems, when you get angry or you feel anxious, then now you are not non-dual. You are somehow cast out from the Garden of Eden. You are bad, and then the judgment comes into play. And it's just like with everything that we do as an ego, we judge ourselves. Pedro says, Martin, I, in quotes, get very subtle glimpses of it between thoughts. Yeah, I think that's where, um, this, I think where, there's this focus in where we are as a culture of, um, it's a really hyper independent, individualistic kind of culture shifting into more of a communal kind of mindset. But yet, I think in that transition, we're hyperly individualistic, and so then there's this sense of focusing on these types of conversations of the individual, of the illusion of the self, and that's where I think there's interest in this topic. And then the practices that are form around that topic are practices of getting rid of the ego or quieting the mind. And that's where having those glimpses in between, because as a hyper individualistic type of a person, of a mindset, we believe that to be ourselves. We become attached to the mind of the thought processes that define our reality, versus focusing on more of emotional or instinctual or physical type of a focus. It is focused not on the descriptions, the definitions, the language that we use to define ourselves. And so when we have that turn off or quiet or however you want to describe it, then there is a way to kind of loosen up those attachments. And that's where practices can be beneficial. But the need to do that is not there. But as a development, as a individual, that may be something that you could find beneficial. But that has nothing to do or doesn't change anything about non-duality. Martin says, I like your style. I meant that the real value of all this to me is experiential rather than intellectual. Identity shift from thought and emotions to just witness. Yeah, I think there's a witness, but then if you look at, I guess I would describe it as um, uh, dualistically, I guess, from like a passive form versus an active form. Oftentimes, the focus on experience of the witness, then it gives more value or meaning to this idea of passivity versus being active, versus having a will, versus making change. And so, uh, if you recognize that and maybe take a a look at your life and see if that's maybe something that seems to be happening, maybe that could be beneficial. Pedro says, Russ, I can get the knowing, very subtle feeling that looking and hearing you blends in with the tree. Yeah. I also see outside my window only one thing happening right now. Yeah. Well, that's the interesting thing about these talks is, I think time, if you consider time, it can be very helpful in understanding the attachments that we have to our perception of reality. And we were watching the Age of Adeline, the Age of Adeline, and I won't give it away, but basically the premise of the movie, which you find out in the beginning, is that she has an accident and she doesn't age. So her age, she stops aging at 29, and so she lives for many decades, and everyone else around her ages and she doesn't. So that's the premise of the story. And in the movie, um, where was I going with this? Oh yeah, time. In the movie, it kind of plays on this idea of time, and one of the characters is an astronomer, and so there's a conversation that they have between a couple characters about how the further that we can see into the universe with our telescopes or technology, the further we look into the past, because the light forms, the energy that we're perceiving from distance way into the universe are things that have happened eons ago, essentially, or many years, light years ago. And so we're not seeing things that are happening in this moment, we're seeing the past. And I think that can be very instructive as to the reality that we have right now, because in this moment that I'm perceiving, I'm speaking into a mic, but there is a time that it takes for the camera to pick up my image and the microphone here, hi, to pick up my voice and to send it through the interwebs, the tubes, I think, if you will, of the internet, and process it and send it in electrical signals all the way through, however it reaches your device and then appears on your screen. So that isn't instantaneous, even though it may seem that way. There's a process, there's a time that it takes. So the experience of me speaking, even though it almost seems instantaneous, is not instantaneous. But the trick of the mind is we can understand something off distant in the universe as happening in the past, because we can abstractly conceptualize that. But when we witness things, especially the speed of light, when I move my hand and I see my hand move, I'm not seeing the time delay. So this is happening instantaneous compared to a star that blew up a million light years away, that happened however long ago. This seems instantaneous, but the same rules apply when it comes to the light forms hitting my eyes. There is still a time delay. So ultimately, what I'm seeing with my vision is all in the past. And so that's an interesting way, if you want to have a little bit of a fun mind game, if you will, to look at life as we are not necessarily seeing things in the moment, and so we're never really seeing things in the moment, but there is this moment that we can never really grasp. And so when the thing that is millions of light years away that happened so long ago, there's still a reality that is happening in this moment. And this kind of gets into quantum physics and stuff like that, but I'm not an expert on that. But it's just interesting to maybe loosen up some of your connections to how you perceive yourself and others, because we're talking about non-duality and relational awareness. All right, so we're about up to an hour. Oh, we got let's see. Da, da, da. Pedro says, Russ, I can get the knowing. Oh, did I already read that? Yeah. Sorry. Non-duality is a scam, says, good afternoon, man. Well, good afternoon to you. So, how are we doing for time? Are you ready to? I'm still on it, but I'm just trying to gauge.
I just finished.
Time doesn't exist. I'm not talking to anyone. There's no one. It's my wife. Okay, so I'll wrap it up in a little bit. Okay. Nice. That was my wife. She made an appearance in this video. Well, not an appearance, but
Your wonderful, beautiful
my
wife, the best person.
my wonderful, beautiful wife, the best person in the world. Oh, I'm sorry. I forgot. My whole idea of this video was to stare deeply into the camera so you feel connected, that you feel seen, that you feel acknowledged as a human being, as a person. So let me speak slowly, directly into the camera, the little tiny dot. And that's how I will speak. But however, I know there's a comment. I saw it out of my peripheral vision pop up, so I should probably move my eyes, because if I can do this, if I can talk directly into the camera, then it seems more personal and you get something out of it more than if I were just talking to space or seem absent-minded, or whatever. Let's see, whatever Paul said. Was it Paul? Oh yeah. No, sorry, it was Tarkin Huggett said, it sounds like you've got some deep-seated issues, but your narcissism and ADHD is persistent and bugging. I'm gonna love that comment. And I'll love Paul's too. And I don't know what Nicola is. Put a link to a YouTube video, but I'm not sure what that is. So if you like watching my other videos, you can always comment. I try to check those out periodically. Martin says, is non-duality a scam, Russ? Well, in a way, yeah, because you're searching for something that you can't obtain. So it's I like when non-duality is a scam pops on and asks questions or makes comments, because it's funny, because I don't really, as far as I can tell, take anything personally when it comes to non-duality, because it doesn't really matter. And so you can call it a scam or whatever, but I think the biggest thing is it points to, so I'm not looking at the camera again. It points to the openness to experience the freedom, the liberty of non-duality, is where, kind of things appear as they are. Things are in this moment what is. It's just a babbling brook of BS. And so it's, in a sense, I think the beauty of non-duality is it focuses on, it points to the opposite. It points to the dualism versus oneness. We talked about that earlier. But the beauty of that is, when you see things, when you make a statement like non-duality is a scam, that has a statement that ultimately has the opposite built in, which is non-duality is not a scam. And so by making a statement, by making a claim, by writing down your thoughts, by by stating your emotions, however you want to do it, manifesting something, then you can take a look at it, you can observe it, it becomes something that you can see, perceive, and you can see the opposite. And through that opposite, there's a kind of a neutrality in between that. And so by saying that non-duality is a scam, it can bring up this sense of, hey, how dare you say that non-duality is not a scam, because I've spent hours and hours of my life making YouTube videos on non-duality, and you just undercut my entire experience, and how dare you do that. But the flip side of that is non-duality is not a scam. So by recognizing that there's an opposite to that, then there's a way to uncover some reality or truth that maybe you are disregarding. It's kind of like shadow work. I think shadow work is very similar to that concept. Pedro says, interesting how non duality handles time and space. I'm still grappling with that. I come more from a quantum physics perspective, but I can allow for time and space from a non duality view. Yeah, there's a whole other. I read some books when I was younger, and like a kid, I was interested in that. I watched Quantum Leap and stuff like that. So it's interesting, but that's way but beyond my purview to speak to that. But I think there's some, especially with like Einstein. I really like Einstein, some of his things that he had said. Martin says neo scumvida. Yeah, sure. Martin, anyway, thanks, Russ, and have a good day, man. Nice seeing you, and don't worry about stupid comments. I find your content refreshing. Yeah, well, thank you, Martin. I appreciate your openness and honesty. And I'm not here to necessarily get accolades, but as a person, as a human being, I prefer praise versus condemnation. But if it was something that I'm talking about that I really had non-duality is what it is, and so that's where I don't mind it as much, I guess. But I do think, I guess, to be truthful, I do take things personally, so I'm not above it all. And that's where, you know if I attempt to, as maybe other speakers seem to appear as above it all, or somehow outside of this, I had this awakening where everything dropped away and now I'm a non-person and blah blah blah. But if I do act like an a-hole, then that's just things that just seem to be happening, that is not me. And whatever, it's like a word salad of disassociation, which I think can be beneficial and understanding. But at the same time, sometimes that becomes the golden idol that people try to get their hands on. Pedro says, you don't speak in absolutes, which is very refreshing. Well, a lot of that comes naturally. And that's where I think, for me, recognizing, to some extent, having some, I'm not a spring chicken, but I'm not that old. Having at least some years behind me, it helps to be a little bit more in tune with what I have to say and my voice, and how I feel like I fit into this whole conversation, because um, I come at it from my perspective, whether you like it or not. But looking at that perspective is something that you can maybe see where your own biases or hangups are existing. And if you and sometimes you just vibe. I mean, it's an energetic thing. Sometimes people, and it changes. And maybe you like participating or watching these videos of mine, and then all of a sudden you get bored, or it just changes and you watch something else, or you stop listening to non-duality, or you do other things. It doesn't really matter. But in the moment, you're here, and so that's great. So we're about a little over an hour. Any final thoughts? I'm going to read a little bit from the Bible before we wrap it up here. I hope I'm probably not going to go back and watch this video, but maybe I will someday. But I hope I did a pretty good job looking to the black dot of the camera, so you felt seen and heard. I guess not heard, but seen. But I did read the comments, so now you feel heard. But the thing about these live talks is YouTube, the algorithm that it uses doesn't seem to really boost these type of videos to put it in front of people. And so I don't know how many eyes end up looking at these, but I think, if you have the time, or you have a long drive, or you're just trying to relax, or you're doing another activity, you're cleaning and you want to have something to listen to, I feel like I have a pretty good boring cadence where it can just kind of be on in the background. You can catch this or that, but you can also do other things. So I'm not necessarily saying things. I'm not telling a story where you have to hang on every word. So that can be something that can be good for you. So as I see no other further comments at this point, I'm going to read a Bible verse from James. James, let's see, where do I want to start? Well, we'll start with the trials and temptations. James chapter 1, verse 2 through 12. I'm going to read James chapter 1, verse 2 through 12. Consider it pure joy, my brothers, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith develops perseverance. Perseverance must finish its work, so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything. If any of you lacks wisdom, he should ask God, who gives generously to all without finding fault, and it will be given to him. But when he asks, he must believe and not doubt, because he who doubts is like a wave of the sea, blown and tossed by the wind. That man should not think that he will receive anything from the Lord. He is a double-minded man, unstable in all he does. The brother in humble circumstances ought to take pride in his high position, but the one who is rich should take pride in his low position, because he will pass away like a wildflower. For the sun rises with scorching heat and withers the plant. Its blossom falls and its beauty is destroyed. In the same way, the rich man will fade away even while he goes about his business. Blessed is the man who perseveres under trial, because when he has stood the test, he will receive the crown of life that God has promised to those who love him. That's James chapter 1, verses 2 through 12. So I want to thank you for joining, and at some point, perhaps we will do another live talk in the future. So subscribe if you have not yet. So thank you.